All right, let's talk about section 3 now out of chapter 12. So we talked about food production. What are some environmental problems with that? Well, first of all, modern farming. We talked about it earlier and how it's really increased the amount of food production in the world, but it is the greatest environmental impact human activity on the planet. It has the greatest impact on the environment of anything that we do. So what's it do? Well, it creates a loss of biodiversity, especially when we're growing a lot of monocultures, which is how we're getting these high increased yields. And so we have a loss of genetic variability in our crops and livestock, because we all want the very best ones, so all of these are basically a clone of themselves, and so that creates problems. We're putting a lot of chemicals into the system to get them to grow, so a lot of air and water pollution as a result of it, and then there's an increase in soil erosion by these huge projects. These big tractors tilling up this soil creates a lot of loss of topsoil, and so there's more soil erosion as a result of it. And so if you look at food production, this talks about the biodiversity loss as a result of it. So you get a degradation of grasslands and forests and wetlands. You get fish kills from pesticides. You get wild predators killed off for livestock to protect your livestock. And then a loss of genetic stuff. When it comes to soil, you get erosion, loss of fertility, salinization, waterlogging, all of that stuff comes. What happens? There's water issues, there's air pollution issues, and there's human health issues, all as a result of food production. And so it's something that touches everything. We need it. We need to eat, of course, but then there's a cost-benefit analysis we have to do, and maybe ways to optimize the benefits without so many harms. So topsoil erosion is a more serious problem than most people think. So we know soil erosion, I hope, is the movement of soil from where it's supposed to be to someplace else. This can happen through both wind and water, and it's increased by doing things. So farming and logging, construction, overgrazing, and off-road vehicles can all lead to greater soil erosion in any particular place. And so when soil erosion happens, it takes away the topsoil, which lowers the soil's fertility. And then, of course, that goes somewhere, and it usually can go into bodies of water, which then creates too many problems with that as well. So if you look at this map here, it shows you where these topsoil erosion problems are at in the United States and where they're a real problem. If it's red, we have serious erosion problems. And so you can see around the world it's true. In the United States, it's very true where we grow most of our crops, basically. Where there's some concern, everywhere we're at, there's some concern with it. And stable and non-issues are usually where we don't grow crops at all, because we can't, or deserts. And so we need to be careful about how we're handling those things. Now, excessive irrigation has other consequences. One of those is salinization. And so salinization is the increase, you spray water onto crops. The water evaporates or gets absorbed or whatever it may do, and it leaves behind salt. And that increases the salt level in that soil. And that salt level increases enough, you can't grow crops in it anymore. So that's what salinization is. And so it's something we have to be concerned about. And we see this situation where we can't grow anything there because it's just too salty. Waterlogging is the other one. And so waterlogging, precipitation, irrigation, whatever, it percolates down. And when it does that, the water level rises. And when it rises, the water table rises up into here. Now the roots can't breathe like they're supposed to. And so it creates too much water in the environment, and that creates its own bit of problems. And so both of these are serious problems with irrigation that we need to pay attention to. And so desertification, or the making of more and more deserts, is one of the results of this, especially salinization. When you do salinization, it kills everything off, but it can also break down the molecules of soil themselves, the clumps. It knocks the clumps apart. Instead of having space in there, like think of gravel with all the space in between it, it kind of compacts the soil down, and it doesn't allow anything to grow. And when it can't allow anything to grow, then it desertifies it, and that creates problems. And so here in the United States, you can see where there's some issues with desertification. In this middle region where we're at mainly, there's a moderate problem with desertification. It's more severe when you move west of us. But it is a problem and a growing problem around the world because of how we're managing irrigation. We need to use a lot of energy to grow crops. Where does that energy come from? Where are the problems at? Well, industrialized agriculture uses about 17% of all the commercial energy in the United States. It's a huge quantity. And so why? Well, there's 2,400 kilometers on average that are ran in a vehicle to get food to your plate. And so about 4% of that energy is used within crops and 2% within agriculture just in producing the food, driving things around, moving things around. Another 6% of that energy is used to process that food, and then 5% more is used to get it to us. And so that 17% is a big number, and we need to be aware of how much energy we're using. And so that's the end of this section. Peace and love.